I
Who
am
you're
Alan Bliss, Alanbliss. I moved to Florida during the uh, summer between my junior and senior years of high school, and I've been a Floridian since then.
Yeah.
I attended college at the University of Florida in Gainesville, and I was there at a time when the University of North Florida had a sudden need for a visiting faculty member just to cover for a regular faculty member who had gotten a fellowship at the last minute. So I was hired at UNF and came over here to start teaching in 2006, 19 some odd years ago. In fact, 19 years ago
Yeah.
last month. And I wound up connecting well with Jacksonville and with the University of North Florida. I have stayed here pretty much ever since, except for a brief interregnum to go back to Gainesville and finish the PhD, finish with the dissertation, defend, and then wound up back here in Jacksonville. So it's been a very satisfactory connection for me. I feel as though I fell backwards into the perfect place for me to be professionally and personally.
Also says you're a lifelong boater and former professional mariner.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So I've always had an affinity for boating in the water. I sailed on Lake Erie when I was little. When I moved to Florida, I took up sailing again. I started out sailing catamarans, small catamarans, B-class cats, they're called, off the beach in the St. Petersburg area. Then I started day racing catamarans, and a friend of mine wound up buying a larger boat that he put into service doing day charters off the beach. So I started crewing for him. Then I got a captain's license and started captaining charters. And another friend had a larger inspected passenger boat, and I started riding along with him and extended the limits of my captain's license. Anyway, I just always stayed involved with the water, and eventually wound up working in that business, co-owned a charter boat center, a small marina, and it just always really spoke to me. Being on the water always felt as though it resonated with some really elemental part of me. There's a spiritual dimension to it. It seemed to be consistent, with some of my gifts. I have never been bored when I've been out on the water, ever, not for a moment. It has always been stimulating, engaging, soothing to a certain extent, and challenging. All of those things. I guess that's part of what makes it interesting. But water of any kind, whether it's water that you can navigate on, sail on, whatever you do with it, it really is pretty elemental to life. For humans, for all creatures, for all organisms, it's really elemental to all life on Earth as we know it.
Has that relationship that you've had with water changed at all? And if so, how?
I think being in Jacksonville, one of the things that appeals to me so much about Jacksonville is that it is a maritime place. It's a river port, it's a seaport, it's an oceanfront city. It's a Navy town. It has some of the most stunningly beautiful natural areas that are part of the maritime culture and maritime geography of the region. Just to the north of the St. Johns River entrance is the Timucuan Ecological and Historic Preserve. To the south is the Guantanamo Ecological and Estuarine Preserve. Two of those places, some of the areas in coastal Florida that more than almost any place else in the state look, sound, smell, and feel very much as they would have at the time of the very first European encounters. We're lucky to have, really lucky to have those things so close to us. I think most people in Jacksonville, if they're aware of them, maybe tend to take them for granted, but I try never to let myself take those for granted.
Yeah.
So your question was, has my relationship changed? I guess it's only improved by being in proximity to such diverse places. We have the deep water channel of the river. We see ocean-going vessels. At the same time, there are places where it's safe and challenging and engaging to swim and paddle.
How have you seen local communities, especially Black communities and neighborhoods, change over time?
In making a comparison with Overtown's experience in Miami, I already stipulated I have not visited Overtown. On the other hand, You cannot have studied urban development in the American Sun Belt in the 20th century and not be aware of what happened in Overtown. Probably the most significant impact there was the introduction of Interstate 95 through the neighborhood, and we had a very similar experience here in Jacksonville in the area that still is known as La Villa. But La Villa was connected to the historically African American neighborhoods that are now associated with Northwest Jacksonville, the Durkeeville area in particular, and Durkeeville is another area that was partially divided and saw a lot of displacement and division because of the interstate. You know, one comparison that you can make about rivers and about the impact of infrastructure like an interstate highway is that a river and limited access highway, like an American interstate, are similar in that they both divide and they connect society. When you think about an interstate highway, it's just like a river in that you can only cross it at certain specific points. You can only cross an interstate at an overpass or an underpass, a grade separation, like a bridge. You can only cross a river under similar circumstances. Unlike a river, an interstate cannot be navigated in anything other than vehicles, trucks, buses, automobiles, traveling in the flow. So the interstate is kind of an artificial barrier in that sense, but it has very much the same impact on the life of an established community. So there's that comparison, there's that analogy. There are also African American neighborhoods in Jacksonville that have not undergone that experience. And probably the most notable example is what's called the Out East or Historic East Side community in Jacksonville. One of the things that's so particularly intriguing about that is that when you walk or drive through and you experience the historic Out East community, you see very nearly the identical patterns of land use and the built environment that existed there shortly after the turn of the 20th century, shortly after Jacksonville's Great Fire, the most significant single event in the city's history. But you see small lot sizes, and most interestingly, you see small neighborhood businesses on street corners, or usually on corners at intersections, but sometimes you see them mid-block in the historic East Side community. Now, a lot of those buildings that were built as commercial enterprises back in the late 19th century, early 20th century, they may no longer be viable uses as neighborhood businesses, but the buildings are still there. So you can see the way that the neighborhood used to occupy and use its space, and you can see the way that small business, small enterprise, and walkable neighborhoods used to operate. Most of that has really been subverted and displaced by modern land use development in urban sections. And we don't build neighborhoods that way anymore. Ironically, we're now starting to see in the deployment of the new urbanism style in community planning an attempt to get back to that, but it still isn't faithful to those original sort of, I hesitate to call them principles because I don't think anybody really consciously thought of them as principles in the late 19th or early 20th century. That was just the way people occupied and used space. But one of the engaging and fascinating things about the East Side is that you can still see the physical environment, the built environment of that, the way it used to exist. And the work that's been going on most recently with Lift Jacksonville and the East Side CDC is an attempt to create economies of the community that'll allow for that to continue. What we so often see in historic communities that have been affected by significant infrastructure changes, they go through a period of profound decline in property values. They go through a period of time when people become averse to investment. Then once investment resumes, it's the phase that's most typically called gentrification. And probably no better example of that in Jacksonville than the Riverside Avondale communities, which 45 or 50 years ago were on the verge of wholesale demolition and displacement in the pursuit of the cause of what was then called urban renewal. There was at one time a proposal to build an elevated limited access expressway right through Riverside and Avondale to solve what was seen as the great challenge of Jacksonville's economy at the time, which was traffic congestion. And the solution was build more roads and build wider roads, build more lanes, and build them in straight lines through places where people didn't want to be and where property values had been suppressed or declined. That's always the path of least resistance. The resistance in the Riverside Avondale neighborhood began in the early 1970s with the establishment of the organization called Riverside Avondale Preservation. And really, if it hadn't been for the passionate support of so many people who cared about, the history and especially the architectural history of these neighborhoods, who knows what it would look like now. But the proof of the value of historic preservation is all around us in the Riverside Avondale neighborhood. You see now some of the highest property values anywhere in Duval County, some of the highest household incomes. It's an area where gentrification has, you could say, has really overachieved. Other areas, I think, have the potential to experience that. What we're seeing in the Durkeeville area is just within the past few years, the establishment of a National Register Historic District in what was a historically African American community. And it's right up against, very, very close to the displacement that occurred when Interstate 95 was built through that neighborhood. Very close to the elevated road embankment of Interstate 95 is a historic African American cemetery that's almost invisible to most people unless somebody tells them about it and they go look for it. I don't think that's within the boundaries of the National Register District, but it's very close to it. Anyway, your question had to do with change in Black communities over time here in Jacksonville, and it hasn't been consistent. It depends, it depends on the location. But we see examples here of almost every form of change and stasis. And I think if we compared these communities to those in other, especially other cities of the American South, this is what's now called the Sun Belt, we'd probably find some parallels.
Are there things that we could do to continuously educate and celebrate the history, the resilience, the revival, the work of the different communities and the cultures in Jacksonville?
You're asking a historian that question. Yes. I think I heard you use the word celebrate in there, and it's not the job of history or historians to necessarily celebrate things in the past. I choose to use the word commemorate when we're observing, an anniversary or a significant inflection point. In 2022, for example, we observed and commemorated the 200th anniversary of Jacksonville's establishment as a place known by that name. Is it a celebration? I think probably that's the wrong term to use, because 200 years of the history of any place is marked by a lot of stories. Some of them are magical and some of them are tragic. And we should not suppress the tragedy. We should not suppress the things that are necessarily so dark. And it's not to suggest that we should, dwell on those things, but we can't overlook those. We can't neglect them. They are all part of the experiences that makes a place and a people what they are in the contemporary moment. Think about us as individuals. We are the product of our upbringing, our family experiences, our education, the places that we've lived, all the experiences that go into a lifetime. Those are the things that make us who we are in the contemporary moment. And if we lose sight of all of those experiences, then how do we even know who we are? And if we don't know who we are, how do we know where we want to go in the next minutes, hours, days, weeks, years of the time that's, that's ours here in this life. So it's very much the same with a place, with a community. So the value of knowing about the past, the people and events that came before us, is in having a sense that this place is ours in the contemporary moment, that we are its stewards and custodians in the present. And when we hold on to that understanding of a place, then that helps us become aware of our role as the custodians of its future. The people who occupy this place, these communities, the neighborhoods of Jacksonville or Miami or any place in the future, the people who occupy those places in the future will be inheriting the legacy of the choices and the decisions that you and I make in the contemporary moment. Being aware of those who came before us makes us more mindful of the importance of those choices in the contemporary moment.